Hi, everyone. Welcome to my live spoken word performance poetry evening. I'm just realizing the light behind me is going to be a bit much, so 1 second. So thanks for joining me. I want to share a little bit about some background about this poetry before I get to reading. First of all, thanks to Kat Friesen, Dave Pritchett, and Ben Jacobs for their critical feedback on this poetry, some of this poetry over the past few months. But if you don't like it, don't blame them. Also, thanks to Jim Perkinson. He and I have been reading poems back and forth to each other for a couple of months. He doesn't so much give me critical feedback as much as help me rationalize the places in my poems where I sacrifice intelligibility for rhythm and sound. In other words, if you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, blame Jim. And hi to Dreaming Stone. Nice to have you tuning in here. Also, shout out to FarmFest folks who will be watching this recording next weekend. So glad that the Catholic Worker Farm is going strong outside London. Thanks, Scott, for inviting me. I was part of the London Catholic Worker from 2004 to 2006, before there was a house or a farm. Some content notes about this poetry. It does include some profanity. There's also some threads running through these poems, especially you all carnivalistas out there. Hopefully we'll catch some of those. At the end, there will be a quiz. But seriously, I'll leave some time for questions at the end if you have any. One of the fun things about reading poems rather than publishing them on paper is that I don't have to declare them done. Even as I was reading through these to prepare, I was making changes. And so these are evolving pieces, and your feedback is welcome. As a close friend gracefully told me a few months ago, some of these poems are as pretentious as they are arcane. I have tried to pace the poems so that there are more unintelligible ones are mixed up with some more accessible short pieces. But as Dave will tell you, even with the best pacing, sometimes they get carried away, which is kind of the point of poetry for me. Hi, Jen. All right, so I'm going to start out with a poem from August 24, 2017. And this feels like a good one to start with because the title is A Poem About Poems. Do you know the smell of how-why poems worked? First chanted round a circle of faces when only flames lurked, the best ones little time machines, stretching, weaving far back into the minds of children, eyes gleaming, receiving them to be recited, retransmitted round a fire, centuries, millennia away. The first storied and stored the ways of the watershed, the season of when to move up into the mountains and bring down the deer, of when to gather to feast on the longest day of the year, of when and how to walk among the oaks and gather acorns. To know each nook like the face of your newborn. Later, they reached beyond simple survival to streak through mountaintop meadows of meaning filled with wildflowers and double rainbows all across the sky, so intense. Glistening listeners leaped deeper into a shared frame of reference. The essence like telepathy, brain-to-brain ecstasy. Poems were tattoos on the bicep of the whole clan, strengthening the collective cultural mind hive. Gifts given again and again and again, not confined by the demands of capital or king. The best of the best wove their way into the lifeways of the collective, shaping not just season, but the tapestry of relationships. They bent power itself around them, under and through, ruling all with one ring. Let everyone in unison sing. The ultramarine, splendiferous, sublime spread like viral metaphors burrowing into ears, jingles broadcasting the rhythm of transformation, each new wave an innovation, riding song ripples over continents and oceans, changing here and there with each bard, new stanzas added and others shed. Dozens of millennia later, the first ones got written down, pinned butterflies, scared and sacred on a page, put together their small streams, a torrent, shaping, breaking, and molding whole civilizations, axial and supple, as wild mountains gave way to ziggurats. But many more still roamed feral, darting in now and again to land a blow on the civilized towers, like Jesus riding the Roman Empire. Bam! His lilies, without thought for tomorrow, gave his movement something to live and die for above Caesar, taxes, and the bewildering pantheon. Yet he too now lies stapled to a page. Will you free the poem? And shout out to Wait But Why article on Neuralinks for inspiring some of that piece. This next one picks up with Rome. I wrote it in November of 2018. It's called When Julius Caesar Crossed the Rhine. I think I was listening to the History of Rome podcast when I wrote this one. 55 years before Jesus, my ancestors watched astonished as legions built a bridge in 10 days for the first time across that wild and mighty flow, domesticating the Rhine at the edge of the known world. Carefully crafted for the folks back home in Rome, great trees turned to lumber and pressed into piles into the riverbed below to support the weight of Caesar's growing demagoguery. Sound familiar? And his legions' feet, a regular road, Roman road across. Once to the other side, they wandered for weeks, burning villages and making their presence felt. Wild nature no longer a safe haven for quote-unquote barbarians. In the face of Caesar's mastery of bureaucratic moving of men and trees and money and the polis. Then they headed home and burned the bridge behind them. Did Jesus ever hear about that bridge as he wandered the wilderness at the other end of empire? This next one was written in September of 2017 as part of the Ojai Church of the Wild service that also often includes time for journaling and reflecting. We were up on Pine Mountain, looking down to the ocean, and this is called Cow Clouds on Pine Mountain. Out on the boulder, grazing the sky, my mind wanders the winds, clouds lolling, munching far below, peaks plow them like snow, stone pillars and pines nestle one another affectionately, sharing lichen and moss. Across years of love and loss, through dappled glens millennia old, time defies me here. Only flies move at the pace my phone races, and civilization hastens. Tiny woodpeckers snack on bugs in the thick bark, marking its thickening, layered waves. Now this is my shortest one, written right before the Bartimaeus Kinsler Institute in February 2017. It's called Mushroom Seeds. Do you know how mushroom seeds work? Microscopic spores infiltrate rotting logs, Chris said. Waiting through long, dry California years for water to penetrate through layers of dead bark, so they can blossom into mycelium to feed on dead wood and poop out soil, soul of the earth. The spirit, Ched said, dwells in our rotting parts. May we welcome the work of mushroom seeds in each of us, feeding on our spoiled spots to poop out hope. And this one's from October 2019. It's called Following the Glitch-Tailed Hawk. When the apps keep crashing and your teeth start gnashing, the feedback leaks in over the speakers Tune into the sonorous symphony of the gears and the machine catching as Mario throws himself on them. Lean in with Cheryl. There is no innocence here. Only spirit noise struggling to be heard neath signal, sacred spheres slipping silkily in circles for 4 billion long years. So when you hear the noise in the signal, you are onto something that will not be quantified or analyzed even with the largest scientific sample size. Tap that crack, back it up and soak it down deep, past caked sieve layers to soil, where the ancient seeds still nestle. The concrete cannot call us back. The falcon cannot hear the falconer, and so it is free again. At last, WB was dialing it in a century before broadband kicked out the sounds of the dial-up modem. So tune in to the noise beneath. Question the signal under the flag, and we may yet span the arc between Morpheus and Abel's blood. So this is another one that I wrote at Ojai Church of the Wild. March 2018. It's called Cocoons Are Complicated Metaphors. Are we caterpillars waiting to bust out as butterflies? Or are we stuck inside our civilized shell, isolated from the wild? I choose to caress the moonflower clinging to the blackened bank, its seed a threshold to wild cosmovisions far beyond the sycamore. I choose the chastened and charred oak after the fire, sprigs of green busting out of dark bark, persistent resistance embodied. I choose wild cucumber, exuberantly bounding from bare black soil, dancing up barbed wire and tarred trunk alike. I choose the high wild crags of the Santa Ynez Range, rising sharply from the wheeling gorge. Camino Cielo hugging its curves, a lover, a friend, a space between worlds. I choose us. I choose the unbearable, boundless beauty of us all. So this is one of my most recent poems. Comes after a long conversation with my friend Allison Brookins about a sermon she was working on about Jacob wrestling with the angel and hope in the midst of COVID-19. And the poem is called Jake's Big Con. Did you really need to stay up all night wrestling? Did you really think you could make that man your mark? Did you really think you could control the wild one on high herself? You laid out elaborate logistical machinations, sending gifts and dividing flocks, moving goats here and sheep there, space between the herds, contingency upon contingency, hoping to outrun Esau's consequence. The anger of the first mark you ever tricked. Tactical improv builds a muscle that is fundamentally fucking fickle, adaptable, until we fool even ourselves and think we can somehow control everything and avoid the inevitable pain of loss. But Genesis turns it all tricksy, topsy-turvy. Voila! The moral of the story is not about hubris after all. Somehow, Jake tricked even God. Lost his name and got the big one, Israel. What the fuck? This next one is the oldest poem that I'll read here. It's from my time in Chicago, from June of 2009. It's called On the Wings of the Dawn. Biking on the lakeshore, glimpses through the fog of 1,000 gulls on the stony pier. Like the clouds last night rolling in, their underbellies painted with the coming darkness. My mind, too, is restless on the edges of tomorrow and the beach of yesterday. Memories wash up, and dreams recede as my imagination reaches out. This one was written in March and November of 2018, and I combined the two poems yesterday. It's called Multiverse Kaleidoscope. In sleep, our soul slips sideways into adjacent universes, possibilities slipping past each other like Leo logic layers, fractal cracks webbing out edges of punk connections, fraying and praying and racing in time. Prophecy piles on problems of perspective and promise, awry and awkward, coaxing us away from cohesion. To stand still is to immerse in gushing flow of paths on chosen and hoses, cross polo Maria with cross-pollination storm rhizomes, bring together ideas, singing with resonant harmonies that ring at ridiculous frequencies. We meld ourselves to paths through feral forests and hopped up cityscapes, foreign yet familiar. Bright shining towers against Kandinsky skies cut through with pink clouds. Storylines stolen from yesterday are rancid with fairy folk, mixed up meanings and powerful portent, synthesizing and fraternizing salaciously, drilling at deep geek depth, intricate pelicans skimming just over the waves, weaving magenta tapestries, hovering over the deep, wings humming with density of reference, a supercut of the canon, dipping dots of rhymed reason. And this piece was written at the end, the closing gathering of a house church that I was part of for a couple of years. And that gathering was in January of 2016. In this valley, where the oldest oaks remember an age before concrete, we gathered for a time around the hearth and honored the sparks of God in ourselves and in each other. Tongues pranced as our stories danced across the nights, winding through shadowed valleys crusted over and worn, and along the hidden canyon high up on the wall of Zion. Stories of bullfighting and white elephant taming, of lazy rivers and Halloween zombies, of exegeting the Greek and cracking it open for the first time, of Les Mis and The Walking Dead, of Enneagram teachings and Quickie Mart and Legos, of dashed expectations and revived dreams. Activist and artist, pastors and punks, wrestlers and architects, earnest and yearning, cynical and tired, pizza and sausages, Thanksgiving and bread broken, wine shared. In this valley where the oldest oaks remember a time before concrete, we gathered for a moment around the hearth and honored the sparks of God in ourselves and in each other. So I'm delighted that Dreaming Stone is watching. This next poem was inspired by an article called Poetry Slam or the Decline of American Verse by Mark Edmondson in Harper's July 2013, and quotes a few places directly from that, so I'll put quotes up when I'm quoting from there. But I really brought it together in March of 2019 for a party for Jay Beck, who I think is watching. Shout out Jay if you're watching so I can see in the comments. And Jay, important background on this, plays a character called Raven in one of the Carnival de Resistance shows that we performed as part of the Carnival de Resistance. It's called Raven's Apocalypse, RUD. And the cycle comes round again, Jim Bear says, while the way of the line cuts us off from the past. 1. On the wings of this on-wild world, Raven stands, surrounded by the chirping of vapid starlings, obsessed with tomorrow's grain stores in the heart of an amaranth patch. Do not go gentle into that damn traffic, friend. 2. Domestication teems with stale pale faces full of ballpark fare, franks and light beers, no thought on Facebook. The stadium cam swivels and sways while the mind's edges fray into sticky, clotted threads. Caveat emptor. There are sappers neath the bulwark. 3. Corvum, you burrowed under the layers of Pompeii ash, an artifact shoved up against the doorday of famine, your every archetype hewn painstakingly from the bedrock or bust. In your eyes, droplets exquisite, on foil, clinging in the crevices. The myths are caged now, up in the hills, where we only hear the faintest gnawing at our thirst their chords. Jesus, on an especially short leash. Persephone dances luminous waves of wheat, sage and voluminous against our subconscious, not as erased as we think. Unpretentious they fled, blackberries strewn along the road, smashed, stained, humane, bruised, and bare. Reconcile no more. Heap coals on yourself, motherfucker. 4. And so it was, late in the Honda dynasty, we wrestled our angels, our Esau's, a merry-go-round of marks, our birthright squandered, dead poets, deaf prophets, king killed in Memphis. We swoon over their white-walled dream tombs, dirty and dead, yet not taken by dominance. They are departed, not assimilated, black wings beating at dusk as the last fierce brightness welcomes them across the river. Jordan Styx. 5. Court prophets and courtiers hold the cliffs, cozying up to the glow of cities angry with history, to toast Trump sausage and roast lollipops. Yet somehow the hedge poet refuses to hedge. Funds fumble on, flying like Ezekiel, wheeling above the world. Rook fuckery dismembering a future of orbiting gardens that cannot hold. Remember. 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 The mad farmer never leaves the plow. She is too placed for the last times, too late for the past times, too new for the arcane fire. But here we are again, unicorn forgotten. We watch the big black bird tear down the veil, take it all down to the root, nothing more than what we are, yea, nay, what we were all along. This one's called The Watery Fire Magic of Caves, or Repastino, Burning Illusion to the Ground. Our magic is not the magic of wish fulfillment, not the magic of quick fixes, not the magic of easy wins. We are standing in the cold mountain stream. We are reaching down with our hands to where the water giggles against stone, bubbles of air frothing there, where our fingers touch fire. The fire has been there since the beginning, when the first stars opened its eyes. The fire has been there since the first tongue wrapped itself around the sacred syllables, sacred spiral, and found the long moan. The fire loves to dance, blue and green, beneath the stream, hidden from most, pulsing with the host, sparkling wine bright. The fire's blue-purple light is what Moses saw in the bush with Steve all those years ago, when he left the guarded, rootless pyramids behind and went looking for the rooted ones in the Sinai. From the hewn to the unhewn stone. Our magic is unapologetically hedged, collective, and gently reflects the divine. Wizards and witches who wheedled and scrounged wisdom outside the taut towers and found their sacred crew. Ours is the magic of those who never fully came down from the mountains, always suspicious of ziggurats. Ours is the magic of those who never fully left the deep forest, the Teutonberg, always suspicious of telephone poles and the steel canopy above. A gasp, a deep breath, up from beneath the river. Your hand on my chest, soft and firm, calling me back to my body, calling me back to now, to my own, to our own. Ours is the magic of you, inside me, who has been waiting for you, wet and warm. So this is my last piece. So if you have questions, start getting ready to put them in the comments. And I'll say before I read this, one of the things I've noticed about some of the best poetry I've written over the years is it brings out something inchoate that I can't put into prose. And so when I write a poem that really goes deep, some of you have heard Texas Hold'em as Lenten practice for Mennonite Golden Boy, which I didn't include in this reading, but is another one of those epic long ones, full of density and reference and pretentiousness. But poems like that, I find I do exegesis on them, on tangling their meaning for years after I write it. And this poem that I'm going to read, I wrote it about a conflict, and then when I picked it up again a few months ago, I realized it was a poem about a much more recent one that I wrote long before. So this is a poem for turning, Ash Wednesday 2016. Remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Genesis 3:19. You welcomed us that dry July, but aren't they all? Through the gate to Anna's home and into the kitchen where onions sizzled succulently among garlic and fava beans fresh from the garden that winds its way around this house. Asparagus and artichoke press against tomatoes and rows while wild sage and buckwheat wander past, dwelling a while amongst us in purple, white, and black glory. Jack's beanstalk in the corner, axis mundi, winding thinly upwards. Yet that first year we somehow caught each other, unawares, napping in the wrong bed, tender shoots crumpling under our weight, picking too many oranges too soon, too little care, and too little grace. Doors slamming, hinges breaking again and again and again. Iggy died, and rot took the plum tree. A weedy silence slouched into the spaces between us, crufting up before we could shovel it out. Before another tense meeting poured in with awkward silences and carefully written lists. We looked at all the oranges on the ground, soft and bruised, juices leaking, as flabbergasted and tongue-tied as the king's men. We couldn't put them back in the tree again. Years passed. There were more spaces in our togetherness. The cypress slowly grew out of the live oak shadow per Khalil. Mediterranean transplant, spindling high into the sky past the sprawling squat native, fractal green bedazzled branches always reaching down, as different as Van Gogh and Ansel. In time, we learn some things it's better we don't say. Better to simmer and saute over low heat, stirring occasionally. With markings of foreheads and seasons, equinox, solstice, and Hallows tide. Remembering with crusty loaves and brandy that first garden we kicked ourselves out of. Cain, hardening tigress and her sisters with irrigation ditches to feed Babel's progress. And now with this sage-fired gray, we remember Jesus and Librado, Quetzalcoatl, wrestling high up in the chaparral, as maize remembers Teosinte, changed through 9,000 generations in the heirloom fields of Indian heirs. These ashes, these words, ancient, arcane, dancing through our ancestors, to our tongues today, tonight, tomorrow. May the warm cadence of this liturgy mark us until we again have the stomach for love. Well, I really wish I could see all your faces out there. Next time I do this, I'll have to do it on Zoom. But I can see your comments. Are there any questions or things you'd like to say before we wrap this up? Well, cool. It was really fun to share all this poetry with you. And yeah, tune in next time for another round of Tim's spoken word poetry performance. Have a great rest of your weekend.